Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. So today's case took place back in 2019. And at the time, a woman called Sarah Barris was a seemingly single mom of 6 children. Everyone said how much of an amazing mom she was. Like, she was a single mom, she was doing it all on her own, raising these 6 children. But she didn't just raise her children on her own. No, Sarah had her brother, Brandon, help her raise her children. Brandon just lived down the street and he was a really good uncle. He would just pop in every day, help her out where he could. And he was trying to be like a father figure to these 6 children. However, there was some dark secrets in this household. The relationship between Sarah and Brandon, so sister and brother, was very suspicious. And their secret little world, their house of cards, was about to come crashing down. And a plan was formed to hide this secret world that included all 6 of the children. And sadly, it would end in tragedy. And I'm not going to say any more than that, and let's jump in. I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, and that is Audible. So do you remember the case of Shelley Notek? I mean, how could you forget that case? The case of Shelley Notek is probably one of the most disturbing, heartbreaking cases I think I've ever come across. Well, the case of Shelley Notek was brought to life by the amazing author Greg Olsen. And I have recently been listening to another one of Greg Olsen's audiobooks called If I Can't Have You. And I truly mean this, but you all need to go and listen to this audiobook right now. It covers the case of Susan Powell, who was a loving mother of 2, and she went missing in December of 2009. And immediately a lot of suspicion was placed on her husband. However, not all was as it seems. The husband, Josh, wasn't arrested or charged straight away. And it was soon discovered that Josh's dad, Stephen, so Susan's father-in-law, had a creepy obsession with Susan. And I'm talking massive creepy obsession. The father-in-law would follow Susan around with a camcorder around the home. He would watch her in mirrors. He had thousands of photos of her. He would steal her underwear from the laundry. He would also read her journals. He wrote love songs about her. And then one day, Susan's father-in-law professed his love to her to her face. Can you even imagine your father-in-law doing that? But then Susan's husband, Josh, he is incredibly messed up from his own childhood because of look at the father he has. But Josh was also incredibly controlling and abusive to his wife, Susan. And when Susan disappeared, no one knew who was responsible for it. But that wasn't the end of the story, because just 2 years after Susan went missing, tragedy would strike again, involving her husband, Josh, and their 2 sons. And I'm not going to say any more than that, but wow, I haven't finished the audiobook yet, but already it's a roller coaster. The journey that this audiobook is taking me on is unbelievable, and Greg Olsen is an absolutely incredible author. And if you have never listened to anything by Greg Olsen, you first need to go download Audible right now and listen to If You Tell by Greg Olsen, which is the story of Shelley Notek. And I still think that If You Tell is his best book. But then after you've listened to If You Tell, you have to listen to the audiobook that I'm currently listening to, which is If I Can't Have You. And Audible is the best place to go to listen to whatever you're interested in, whether that is the best-selling audiobooks in every single genre, exclusive Audible originals, popular podcasts. And Audible's mystery and thriller section is one of my favorites, and it's absolutely incredible. So if you have any thriller, mystery, or true crime audiobooks that you recommend to me, let me know in the comments. And if you guys wanted to check this out, new members can try Audible for free by going to audible.com/Danielle or by texting Danielle to 500 500. Again, go to audible.com/Danielle or text Danielle to 500 500. I will leave the link in my description box, and by using my link, it really does help out this channel because it lets Audible know that you came from this video. So thank you again to Audible for sponsoring today's video, but thank you to every single one of you guys watching right now, because truly from the bottom of my heart, without all of you guys, I wouldn't get opportunities like this. And now let's jump into today's case. Sarah Barris was born in 1984. An exact date of birth is not known. And she grew up in the city of Sheffield in the UK. And pretty much from the moment Sarah was born, there was chaos. Sarah was one of 5 children, and all 5 children had different fathers. And there was just never any stability in the house, especially when it came to her mom's boyfriends. And none of the fathers, as far as I'm aware, none of the 5 fathers wanted anything to do with their children. And Sarah grew up in a household along with her 4 other siblings, her 4 other half siblings. So I should stress that they all have the same mom but different dads, so they're half siblings. Not that it makes it any better. So Sarah grew up in a household with her 4 siblings, and there was just no rules of the house. It was complete chaos. And when I say no rules, I mean no rules. There was no bedtime. Like, the children could literally go to bed whenever they wanted, and sometimes they would not go to bed. There was no meal times. The children would just kind of like grab food when they wanted it. And also the children, they didn't have to go to school. You have to go to school, but no, for these children, there was no rules. They could do whatever they wanted. And of course, that is not the best environment to raise children in. There would be all sorts of dodgy people going in and out of that household, and all of the children, from pretty much the moment they were born, they were exposed to alcohol, drugs, and possibly all sorts of other inappropriate behavior that children shouldn't be exposed to. So that alone, that environment is not good for children. So not only are the children being exposed to serious neglect, but there is also allegations of sexual abuse and possibly violence towards the children from a very young age. In particular, Sarah suffered sexual abuse from a very young age from a number of different perpetrators. And I don't know their identities and I don't know what they did, but I think we can all imagine the kind of dodgy people that were coming in and out of this house and what they were possibly capable of. And because of this abuse, social services got wind of it, and at some point, Sarah and all of her siblings, so all 5 children, were taken into care. And over the next few years, Sarah and her siblings would just bounce around in the care system, going to various care homes, foster homes. And then at the age of 9, Sarah was returned to the home to live with her mom full time. And this is when Sarah started to become very close with her older brother, Brandon, who was obviously her half-brother. So Brandon Machin, he has a different last name to Sarah because they have different dads. He was 4 years older than Sarah. So Sarah is currently 9, so Brandon is 13. And he also has spent the last few years of his life bouncing around the care system. And now they both find themselves living with their mom again. And one thing that can define Brandon from a very young age is that he was described as aggressive. He was the definition of a bully and a troublemaker. He was an incredibly violent child and now teenager. He would just randomly attack his siblings, other children in the streets, at school. He would literally just start randomly punching and kicking other children. Sarah, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. She has actually been described as really quiet, shy, reserved, and actually kind of caring towards her other siblings. So they're literally on different ends of the spectrum. However, when Brandon and Sarah are returned to the home at ages 9 and 13, Sarah looks up to Brandon. She admires him, and this would turn Sarah into a completely different person. Sarah became filled with anger, hatred, rage, aggression. She basically was imitating her brother. Sarah started getting into fights at school. And there was one thing that Sarah loved to do, and that was watch her brother beat up other children. And Brandon and Sarah, they didn't just inflict violence and bully other children, they also did it to their own siblings. There was one time where Brandon grabbed their younger brother, Martin, held him by the legs, turned him upside down, and rammed his head into the floor repeatedly. And Sarah was just watching this, giggling like Brandon's little sidekick. But Sarah was also attacking her siblings as well. She pushed her sister out of a tree one time, and her sister actually got some serious injuries from being pushed out of this tree. But Sarah just loved it. Both of them loved it. It was their favorite pastime to inflict pain and bully others. The two of them also became obsessed with horror movies. Not that there's anything wrong with horror movies, not saying that at all, but they're still incredibly young and they're getting obsessed with horror movies for the wrong reasons. They repeatedly watched Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger was their idol. They loved anything with blood and guts and gore. And then from this obsession with horror movies, their obsession with blood and guts then led on to a very disturbing pastime that they developed, and that was harming animals. They would find bird nests in the neighborhood before killing the birds with stones, and they got enjoyment out of this. But then the two of them, Brandon and Sarah, also decided to to kill the family pet mice. And one day, just for the fun of it, Brandon and Sarah decided to open up their cage, let the mice run around on the floor, and then both of them just started stamping on the mice, killing them. And the other siblings in the house just watched on in horror. Their other siblings have described them as psychopaths. And this is what Brandon and Sarah's relationship was like over the next few years. And over those few years, the situation in the house was still no better. The children are all still being exposed to the wrong things. They are all being neglected, possibly abused. So the children still are being placed in and out of care. And it was when Sarah was 14 years old that she was returned back home for the final time. Sarah would not go into care again. And it was when Sarah was 14 that she got the courage to go to the police about historical sexual abuse. And the abuse was against a number of people, and the police thankfully did take these abuse claims seriously. And after investigating, one person was charged and arrested and found guilty of rape. So we don't know the details of what Sarah went through, but the fact that someone was found guilty of rape and went to prison, I think that just gives you a small insight of what Sarah was exposed to and what she went through as a child. She has not exactly been exposed to healthy relationships, healthy sexual relationships. And it was around this time where she started to get very close with her brother Brandon. A little bit too close for comfort, if you know what I mean. Now, at this point, Sarah is 14 years old, and remember, Brandon is 4 years older. So Brandon is currently 18 years old. And this is when the two of them started sending love letters to one another. This was going way past a normal brother and sister, a sibling relationship. Because in these love letters, they were both professing their love for one another. And I'm not talking sibling kind of love. No. I'm talking romantic love. And number one, incest is illegal in the UK. They are half brother and sister. That is incest. That is illegal in the UK. But number two, Brandon is 18. Sarah is 14. Making Sarah a child, which is illegal and wrong on so many different levels. And their mom actually found out about their relationship. She discovered the love letters between her two children. It's like, oh my God, can you imagine being a parent and finding love letters between two of your children? Oh, so the mother found out and she became very concerned, thankfully, and she did inform social services about the inappropriate relationship between two of her children, but nothing was ever done. And I just want to repeat that. She reported to social services that her two children were in love with one another and no one seemed to care. No one thought to visit the household, maybe check out what was going on. No, nothing was done. So then we jump forward a couple of years. Sarah is now 16 years old. And for those of you that are not from the UK, or maybe you just don't know, 16 is the age of consent in the UK. So I think we all know where this is going now, don't we? Yes, because Brandon and Sarah's relationship, as soon as Sarah turned 16, their relationship turned sexual. It makes you feel sick, doesn't it? Brother and sister. No. Also, I just want to point out their age differences again. Brandon would be 20 years old right now and Sarah is 16. And I don't know what Brandon has gone through, and quite frankly, he is old enough now to know that this is wrong. And for just 1 second, let's just forget that they're brother and sister. Let's just pretend that they're not related at all. But there's part of me that feels really sorry for Sarah. I'm not going to lie there, because she's incredibly vulnerable, especially given what she has gone through. And Brandon being the older person in this relationship, it just feels a little bit predatory. It feels like he's taking advantage of a girl that has been sexually abused for years. It just doesn't sit right with me at all. And then you add on the fact that they're brother and sister. No. The fact that they're brother and sister, there is no excuse for either one of them there. But it gets worse. It gets worse. Yes, it does. Yes, it does, because they don't seem to know what protection is. They don't seem to even have a clue what a condom is. No. Because Sarah falls pregnant. When Sarah was 19 years old, she fell pregnant for the first time. Their sexual relationship had been going on for a few years and they became infatuated with one another. They were inseparable. It was like they were soulmates, but they were brother and sister. Whew, I feel like I need to take a deep breath there, because what the actual hell? Let me just get this straight. Sarah is going to be that child's mom and aunt And Brandon is going to be that child's father and uncle. So Sarah is now pregnant with her brother's baby, and she goes on to give birth to a boy who they name Blake. And Sarah, and probably Brandon, I'm not sure, but Sarah definitely decided that no one can know the identity of the father. Sarah was too embarrassed, as she should be. Sarah didn't want anyone knowing that her brother was the father of her baby. And when she was at the hospital giving birth, hospital staff asked about the father, and she just said, oh, the father doesn't want to be involved in the baby's life. I'm going to be a single parent. So Sarah and Brandon decided that no one would ever know who the father is of Blake. So Blake grew up without knowing his father. So Sarah, she's now living on her own with her newborn baby, and to the outside world, she looks like a single mom. Meanwhile, Brandon lives in a different house to not raise suspicion. He lives in a different house just down the road, and Brandon pretends to be a very caring uncle and pops into the house every single day to help raise Sarah's baby, his nephew. Now, some family members were suspicious of the relationship between Sarah and Brandon. And of course, given their history when they were younger, people were suspicious. But no one says anything. Everyone just kind of turns a blind eye. Now, you would think, after the fact that they now have a baby together and their brother and sister, surely that should knock some sense into them. Surely they should call off their relationship. But no, they don't. They carry on their sexual relationship. In secret though, because they're too embarrassed for anyone to know. To the outside world, they just pretend that they're really close brother and sister. But then, God, deep breath everyone, because a few months after Sarah had given birth to Blake, she falls pregnant again. It's like, did you not learn your lesson the first time? So Sarah goes on to give birth to another boy who they named Tristan. And again, it was a very similar situation at the hospital. The hospital asked about the father, and Sarah just said she was a single mom. The dad didn't want to be involved. So now the couple, and it makes me feel sick even calling them that, they now have 2 children, Blake and Tristan. And these 2 children are very significant to today's case. And I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking it as well. Surely no more. Surely no more children. Surely they will stop having sex with one another. Like, surely, come on, please stop. But no, they don't. Because over the next couple of years, Sarah falls pregnant 2 more times and gives birth to 2 more boys. And we don't know the names of these 2 other children. Their identities have been protected. So that means that Sarah has given birth to 4 children in 4 years. And every single time she was at the hospital staff asked about the father, and Sarah just said the exact same story. All of the children, they have the same father, but the father is not interested, and Sarah is a single mom. Now that should have raised red flags at the hospital. This woman has come in 4 times in 4 years to give birth, and there is no father in sight. Social services should have really looked into this, made sure that everything was okay. But no one really seemed to ask those questions. And when Sarah was filling out a form about the birth, Sarah even ticked the box confirming that the father of her children was not a blood relative. So over the next few years, Sarah and Brandon live this completely secret life. Sarah is living in a house on her own with her now 4 children, and to the outside world, she looks like a single mom. And then Brandon lives down the road, and every single day he comes over to the house to help raise the 4 children. And the whole time, Brandon and Sarah are still continuing on their secret sexual relationship. Oh yeah, they haven't stopped having sex ever. And as the children grow up, as they start to reach the ages of 5, 6, 7, the children are naturally asking questions. They are asking questions about their dad, who he is, what his name is, blah, blah, blah. The children also wanted to know why their dad was not in their life. And this is when Sarah decided to tell her children a whole pack of lies. She told the children that their dad was a war hero and that he died in World War II, which is obviously impossible because World War II ended 6 decades before any of the children were even born. But obviously the children are so young, they don't really question this. They're not really thinking like that. So the children are thinking that their dad is dead and that the man that comes around to their house every day, Brandon, is just Uncle Brandon. And then over the years, especially as the children got older, Brandon and Sarah realized that the children had significant developmental disabilities. Their eldest child, Blake, was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. He also had severe speech and communication difficulties, and he was referred to a speech and language specialist. Their second eldest child, Tristan, was diagnosed with ADD, so attention deficit disorder. He also had severe speech and communication issues, and he also had pretty severe allergies as well that he had to go to a specialist about. And whilst we don't know exactly what the two younger children suffered with, we do know that they had to have special education and they had to attend specialist programs at their school. And why did the children have these developmental disabilities? Well, it is suspected that it's because of the parents, because of the incest. Children born of incest have a much higher probability of being born with some sort of disability. And it is a very good chance that that is exactly what is happening here. And so the children go about living their lives in this extremely strange and messed up family setup. The children truly thought that their dad was dead, that they were being raised by their single mom, Sarah, and then their uncle Brandon just used to come over every day to help raise them. Brandon would turn up every single day at 7 a.m. on the dot, and he would spend the rest of the day in the home. Both Sarah and Brandon were unemployed, and Brandon would help out anywhere that he could. Brandon would do most of the chores, cooking, cleaning, and he was pretty attentive to the children. He was always the one changing the nappies, feeding the children, making sure that the children got to school. He would do like the food shopping and everything. Brandon was pretty much doing everything in that house. And Brandon, it said that he had to wait on Sarah hand and foot, which is really strange, isn't it? Because when they were younger, when they were growing up, Brandon was the more dominant one, the aggressive one, the one that was the leader. And Sarah would just kind of follow him around. But those roles have reversed. Sarah is now the dominant one. She's the one that is in charge. And when I say wait on her hand and foot, I truly mean that. Sarah would just sit around and Brandon would bring her food, bring her drinks, rub her feet, do her laundry. She didn't have to lift a finger. Brandon would also attend all of the appointments that Sarah would have with social workers about her children's special needs, and no one seemed to ask questions. Social workers never asked about the children's biological father. They never asked why the uncle was so present. He was always there. There was just no questions asked. And family and friends just thought that this whole setup was really strange. The family had no idea why Brandon was so willing to do everything for her. And they were pretty much in a full-on committed relationship to one another, just in secret. There was one time where Brandon actually started talking to a woman on Facebook. Sarah found out and she lost it because she wanted her brother all to herself. So the children are living in this incredibly weird, messed up family arrangement, but the children are not having it easy. The two older children, so Blake and Tristan, they were severely bullied at school. They never had any friends. They were incredibly isolated. They never really ever seemed to integrate with the other children. There were even strong concerns that Brandon was physically abusing the children. When one of the children was a toddler, I think they were age like 3 maybe, this is when Sarah and Brandon's brother, Martin, it's just so messed up that the parents share siblings. Oh my God, it's hard to even wrap your head around. So Martin is the sibling of both Brandon and Sarah. And when Martin was around the family one time, he witnessed Brandon mistreating the toddler. He violently dragged the toddler along concrete floor. And Martin was incredibly concerned about this kind of behavior. So Martin reported his brother for mistreating their nephew. So even though Martin reported the possible abuse that was going on, no one did anything. So now we skip forward a few more years. Both Brandon and Sarah are in their 30s and their secret relationship has been going on for nearly 2 decades. 2 decades, brother and sister. So they already have 4 children. The 2 oldest children, Blake and Tristan, are approaching their teenage years. And this is when Sarah and Brandon decide to have more children. Just have to remind myself, brother and sister. Why are they even still together. 2 decades they have been having this secret relationship. They are now in their 30s. I am sorry, but they are mature enough to realize what they are doing is wrong. I get it, okay? Dating is hard, but you don't need to go for your brother or sister. No, step out of your front door and meet someone not related to you. Also, who wants to be in a relationship that badly that you want your sibling? No. So anyway, they've been in a relationship for 2 decades now. They already have 4 children. They take a break from having children for approximately a decade. And now they decide to have more children. Sarah and Brandon go on to have 2 more children, 2 more boys. But the thing is, Sarah wanted a girl because she has 6 boys. So they start trying for a 7th baby in the hopes that it will be a girl. Sarah even downloaded an app on her phone that apparently helps you conceive the gender of your choice. And now that Sarah has popped out 2 more children, family and friends are starting to ask questions because it's like, who is the father? And Sarah would tell friends, family, whoever asked, that the father of her children was the same man. They all had the same dad. He was just a random man that she would hook up with every now and then to get pregnant. But he didn't want anything to do with the children, which suited her fine because she just wanted children. And I do struggle with this case, I do, because Sarah and Brandon have a history of being inappropriate with one another when they were children or when they were teenagers. Why is no one putting 2 and 2 together? I think the reason why no one really questioned who the father was of these children was because Sarah seemed like a really good mom. She seemed caring, loving, attentive. To the outside world, she was actually doing a really good job of raising 6 children on her own. She attended all appointments regarding her children and their special needs. Social services would go over to the house as well just to check that everything was okay because of the children and all of their needs. And there was never any concern. The children are now aged 14, 13, 12 and 11, and then the 2 younger children are now aged 3 years old and 7 months old. The 2 older children, Blake and Tristan, are now attending secondary school in Shire Green, Sheffield. Blake was described as a child that loved football. He wore his heart on his sleeve and he just seemed to have this ability to make people smile. Tristan was described as mischievous and lovable, and he was incredibly brave and he loved to express himself through clothes and especially his hair. Tristan liked to dye his hair pretty much every colour under the sun, and it sometimes would get him into trouble at school. There was even a time in 2017 when Tristan appeared on the BBC. He was on TV, and it was a programme that followed children transitioning into secondary school. And on this programme, Tristan said that one of his really close friends was diagnosed with bone cancer, and Tristan dyed his hair yellow in support of his friend because yellow was his friend's favourite colour. And Tristan was trying to raise money for charity.
Why have you got a bright yellow Mohican is a question I've never had to ask in all my years here, but today it's the one I'm asking of you.
My friend's dying of bone cancer. I asked if I could dye my hair yellow for him.
And people have said that really does sum up Tristan. He just cares so deeply for people and he would do anything for his friends. However, it was in 2018 when the 2 older children, Blake and Tristan, it was becoming apparent that they were having behavioural problems. Over a period of 12 to 18 months, the 2 brothers were constantly getting into trouble, and social services had to visit the house a total number of 13 times over that 12 to 18 month period, and a variety of issues were uncovered. First of all, it was discovered that the 2 boys had a massive obsession with online pornography. They would apparently be accessing pornography at all times of the day, every single day, whenever they got a free 5 minutes, when they were at home, when they were at school, when they were out in the world, when they were at friends' houses. And Sarah tried to put a stop to this. She put a ban on the internet. She took devices off them. The school even banned the 2 boys from accessing the internet as well. And social services advised that Sarah have an open door policy to their bedroom, which meant that the boys were not allowed to have their bedroom door shut, so Sarah could keep an eye on what they were doing. However, it was also discovered that Blake was having sexually charged conversations with strangers online, and one of these strangers asked Blake to send a photo to them of Blake's penis. And obviously this is very concerning. This is not Blake's fault because he is the child in this situation, but it obviously is concerning that he is accessing and talking to these kinds of people. And Sarah, when she found out about this, she was furious, but it just keeps getting worse. The problems keep getting worse. It was also discovered that the two boys were becoming very aggressive, violent individuals. They were constantly getting into fights at school. They were both still being bullied quite badly at school, and the way the two boys were dealing with this was to get into constant fights. And this is actually very similar to what Sarah and Brandon, aka their mom/uncle father, were like in school as well. And also, just like their parents, Blake and Tristan started to become obsessed with horror movies. Anything that was incredibly violent. They loved to watch videos on violence, guns, weapons. The two boys as well were also becoming incredibly aggressive towards their siblings, just like their mom and dad. Blake and Tristan also increased their risk-taking behavior. There was one time that Blake decided to steal his aunt's car and take it for a joyride, and I actually do mean his aunt. I don't mean his mom, Sarah, because yeah, remember that Sarah is their mom and aunt. It was also discovered that Tristan had started to carry a knife on him at school, but the thing is, the concern wasn't actually that Tristan would use the knife on another pupil. The concern was that Tristan was going to use the knife on himself, because Tristan was having very suicidal thoughts, and there was one time where he expressed to his mom, Sarah, that he wanted to take a knife and stab it through his heart. And Sarah again was incredibly concerned about this. She reported this to social services, and Tristan underwent an urgent mental health assessment, and then a whole plan, like a care plan, was put in place to help him. But do things stop there? No, of course they don't. Because the two boys, their highly sexualized behavior continues to get worse. This is when Blake and Tristan start to act out sexual fantasies on their own siblings. And all I keep thinking is, I wonder where they learned this behavior from. There was one time where Blake was caught spying on a younger sibling when they were in the shower. Both Blake and Tristan were also having very sexually charged and suggestive conversations with their younger siblings. Tristan would also repeatedly ask his younger siblings to sit on his lap, and Sarah was worried that there was a sexual nature behind this. I mean, she would know the warning signs of inappropriate sexual relationships between siblings, wouldn't she? Tristan was also displaying inappropriate sexual behavior at school towards other students. The exact details of this are not known. However, there is one incident that was reported that Tristan was with another student from his school in a bedroom, and Tristan inappropriately touched the other child over clothes. There was another recorded incident when Tristan was inappropriately dressed as a baby, and I don't know any more information than that. I don't know what that would mean. And then there was one time when Blake asked one of his younger siblings to squeeze his genitals. There was another occasion when Tristan tried to get Blake to masturbate him. So that was a lot, wasn't it? There is very concerning behavior coming from both Tristan and Blake, most of it of a sexual nature. And all of these incidents were reported by Sarah. Every single time something happened, their mom, Sarah, she was so concerned that she reported it to social services. She was very honest. She didn't try to hide anything. She was very forthcoming. However, every single time that Sarah reported this concerning behavior to social services, the only advice that she got was to never leave the two older boys alone with their younger siblings. She never actually got any other help. And this case is really, really weird to me because Sarah, forget the incest and everything with her brother, but Sarah is actually doing the right thing. Every single time something happens, she is reporting it to the people that she should be reporting it to. She's not trying to hide anything. She's trying to ask for help. She never misses an appointment. She always allows social services into the home. So right now, Sarah's actually doing everything right, which is not normal in these cases, is it? And because her two oldest boys, their behavior was just getting more and more out of control, more and more concerning, and no one was helping helping her, Sarah was completely freaking out. Now, if you remember from Sarah's childhood, she was sexually abused by a number of people. And Sarah was worried that she was now, quote, raising monsters who would ultimately turn into the sexual predators that would prey on young children just like the predators preyed on her as a child. And Sarah didn't want her 2 children to turn into what she thought were monsters. She was worried that if she didn't get this problem fixed, that it was only going to get worse, which is why she was so open and honest with social services. There was even one time that Sarah told social services that she wanted the police involved because she wanted her 2 children arrested. But not only was Sarah concerned about what her children were becoming, there was also another big concern that Sarah had, and that is that she didn't want the 2 boys taken off of her and placed into care. Sarah was absolutely terrified that her children would end up in care because Sarah had spent a lot of time in care when she was a child, and when she was in care, she was mistreated. So she was going to social services and saying things like, my boys are monsters, I need help. But then on the flip side, she was also saying, but please, please, please don't take them from me. Please don't take them and put them into care. And every single time Sarah would say, are my children going to get taken off of me? Are they going to get placed into care? And every single time people from social services assured her that that wouldn't happen. But Sarah was paranoid. She didn't believe them. But over a period of a few months, Sarah was becoming increasingly paranoid that not only the 2 older boys were going to get taken off of her and put into care, but all of her children were going to get taken off of her. And then we get to May of 2019, and this is when an incident would occur that would change everything. Because one day, a parent of a child from a local primary school made allegations that Tristan had sexually assaulted their child. And the exact nature of this sexual assault is not known. It hasn't been made public, but authorities immediately got involved, so it was probably pretty serious. So social services met with Sarah, and they said something to Sarah that completely caught her off guard, because social services wanted to know who the biological father was of both Tristan and Blake. Social services did not know that the biological father of Tristan, Blake, and all of the other children was actually Sarah's own brother Brandon. And there was no way that Sarah was going to reveal that the father of her children was actually her brother, because that would be a one-way ticket to getting her children taken off of her. But social services were adamant. They wanted and needed to know who the biological father was, because there had been one too many incidents involving Blake and Tristan, and most of the incidents were of a sexual nature. And social services were really concerned because Tristan and Blake, they're both 13 and 14 at this point. That is very, very young. And social services were concerned that the 2 boys had possibly been sexually abused by their own dad. Which makes sense. They are both so young, 13 and 14. It's like, where are they learning this behavior from? What are they being exposed to? So questions around their parents is very normal. But when Sarah was asked about their biological dad, she completely froze up. She started acting all shifty, and she flat out refused to tell social services who their dad was, which made social services incredibly suspicious. And social services just said that they would be back in touch soon. So after the meeting with social services, because of the incident with Tristan, he was moved to a status of child in protection, which basically means that the child is being monitored for whatever reason. And obviously Tristan is being monitored because it is suspected that he has sexually assaulted another child. And because of this, Sarah goes into full-on panic mode. She texts her brother / lover / father of her children that social services are going to discover their secret and they need to do something about it. And then Sarah makes some very concerning posts on Facebook. The first was a quote from the author Stephen King, which said, quote, "Murder is like potato chips. You can't stop with just one." In another post, Sarah wrote, quote, "I'm not mean or cold-hearted, I'm just sick of being fucked over." In a third post, Sarah shared an image of the Grim Reaper holding a blade covered in blood with the caption, quote, "Coming for you." Now, I just want to point out that Sarah does have a love for horror movies and books and TV shows and stuff. So someone expressing their interest in the horror genre, I don't think that that is concerning. However, it's just a little bit suspicious, the timing of these Facebook posts, and given what she goes on to do. Sarah also started sending very concerning text messages. She sent one message to a friend and she wrote, quote, "I still feel like I failed Blake. I should lock me and my lot away so they can't hurt anyone else. I want to die daily, to run away and to hide from everyone." She also said, quote, "I love my kids too much to kill them. I can't put them into care for the same reasons." In another message, she said, quote, "I've thought of every possible solution to this mess, putting them all in care, checking into the local nut house, or mass murder." Yeah, she really said that. She said that in a text message to a friend, that she had considered all of the possible solutions to this situation. And her solutions were to put everyone in care, to put everyone in what she has described as a nut house, or mass murder. Also, that friend that she sent those messages to, were they not concerned? Why weren't these texts maybe reported to the police? Sarah also sent some text messages to her brother/lover/father of her children, saying, quote, "They need to die now. I'd rather kill them and kill myself than lose them to care. I gave them life and I can take it away." And then on the 23rd of May 2019, Sarah sent another message to Brandon saying, quote, "They need to die now. They need to die today." And very sadly, we now get to the tragic events of today's case. Because on the 23rd of May, just after Sarah sent that message to Brandon, Sarah and Brandon got together and decided that they would do anything to keep their dirty little secret from the world. So what was their plan? How were they going to keep the fact that they were brother and sister a secret? They decided that they were going to murder all 6 of their children. Yeah, you heard that right. And I just don't understand. I really don't. Because how is it that murdering your 6 children, how is that going to stop the fact that you are brother and sister from coming out? How does that actually protect your secret? Social services are already onto their case. If all 6 of their children all of a sudden just wind up dead, do they really think that social services, the police, somebody is not going to look into it? And how were they going to murder all of their children? Well, they decided that they were going to poison them. So pretty much all of their children, I think it was like 4 or 5 of their children, all of them had been diagnosed with ADHD. So Sarah decided to go to the local pharmacy and pick up the prescriptions for all of her children for their ADHD medication. And of course, because most of them did have ADHD, that was a lot of medication. Later on that same evening, Sarah starts messaging friends, family, that all of her children have come down with a sickness bug and that the children wouldn't be able to attend school the next day. She was already trying to plan out her story. And finally, later on that evening, just before bedtime, Sarah and Brandon gathered up as much of the ADHD medication that they could, and they forced the 4 older children to swallow as many pills as they could. And the children didn't want to do this, and they resisted. However, Sarah and Brandon put pressure on them, and the children chose to trust their mom and uncle. At this point, Sarah and Brandon were only focused on murdering the 4 older children. I don't actually know what their plan was for the 2 younger children who were currently 3 years old and 7 months old. So after the 4 older boys had taken a load of pills, I actually don't know how many they each took, but clearly Sarah and Brandon thought that it was enough to be lethal. They put the 4 boys to bed. Sarah went to bed. Brandon left the home, walked to his house, went to bed, and they went to sleep. And it's just like, how can you fall asleep after doing something like that to 4 innocent children? And then we get to the next day, Friday the 24th of May. Sarah goes in to check on her 4 older children, expecting them to be dead in their beds. But they weren't. They were alive. The only side effect of taking a load of ADHD medication was that all 4 children were incredibly sick. They were nauseous, some of them were hallucinating. But the 2 older boys, Blake and Tristan, they got out of bed and they were clearly too sick to go to school. So they got out of bed and started playing on their Nintendo Switch. And Sarah was furious. She was furious that the pills hadn't worked and her 2 oldest boys are now playing video games. Sarah messages her brother/lover, Brandon, that the plan has failed, that the children are still alive. And I just don't understand why at this point, Brandon and Sarah, why didn't they change their mind? After this failed attempt, why was that not a wake-up call? Because Brandon was also furious and he rushed over to the home, and both Brandon and Sarah start researching online the best way to kill somebody. They look at strangulation, suffocation, drowning, and they decide to make up a new plan because clearly poisoning didn't work. So after they have researched the best way to kill somebody, the quickest way, the most efficient way, whatever, Sarah and Brandon head into the bedroom of the 2 oldest boys, Blake and Tristan. And this is when Sarah pulled out a dressing gown cord and wrapped it around Tristan's neck and just started to strangle him. And Tristan tried to fight her off. He was screaming and shouting and begging for his mom to stop, but she didn't. Sarah was strangling her son for nearly 3 minutes. Now, I know 3 minutes doesn't seem like a very long time, but if you are strangling your child, 3 minutes would have felt like a lifetime. And I also want to add that Blake, the brother, watched this whole thing. Sarah was killing her one child in front of the other one. And Blake was traumatized, understandably so, because he is watching his mom murder his brother. And Blake turns to his uncle, who he doesn't even know is his dad. And Blake says to his uncle, "Why is mom trying to kill Tristan? Stop her." But Brandon didn't do anything. Instead, Brandon walked over to Blake and started to strangle Blake with his own hands. I don't even know where the other children are at this point. Are they in the room? Can they hear anything? This is literally a horror scene taking place in that bedroom. And then finally, after Sarah and Brandon finished strangling their own children, they left their 2 sons there on the floor for dead. However, they wanted to make sure that their 2 sons were dead, so they placed bin bags over their head just to make sure that the job was done. But it's not over yet because they have 4 more children to murder. Because after the horrific attacks on Blake and Tristan, Sarah and Brandon now head into the bathroom. They fill up the bathtub with water and then they grab their 3rd oldest boy and they try to drown their 3rd oldest child. The 3rd oldest child was just 12 years old and they were kicking and screaming. Their head kept bobbing up out of the water, and every single time their head was out of the water, they screamed at their mom and at their uncle, "Why are you trying to kill me? Why are you trying to kill us?" However, thankfully, this murder attempt failed. I don't know how or why. I don't know if Sarah and Brandon lost their conviction. I don't know if they were just unable to drown their 3rd oldest child. Either way, this murder attempt failed and the 3rd oldest child survived. So after the failed murder attempt, Sarah actually starts to panic right now because she's finally realized that she's not going to get away with murdering all 6 of her children. But she's already murdered 2 of them, so what is she going to do? This is when Sarah, on her own, decides that she is going to place all of the blame on her brother/lover/father of her children. So shortly after the attempted murder on the 3rd oldest child, Sarah grabs the 4 remaining surviving children and barricades herself into a bedroom. And obviously, Sarah has just tried to kill one of the children in that bedroom with her. The 4th oldest child is 11 years old, so they are at an age where they are aware of what is going on. And then the 2 younger children, I don't really know how much they would have been aware of because they're only 3 years old and then 7 months old. But still, in that bedroom, it was chaos, it was confusion. The 2 older children especially would have been so scared. They're also still suffering the effects of the overdose that their parents gave them the night before. But Sarah, in this bedroom, she started to make several notes on the notes app on her phone, and she wrote on her phone, quote, Brandon is the dad to all the kids. The pills didn't work, so he had me kill Tristan and he's killed Blake. I'm sat here with the others. He's going to kill them, then me. He's tried to drown the third child. It's not working. I'm so scared. She is basically trying to make herself look like the victim. Brandon has coerced her into this plan. And now Brandon is going to kill all of them. In a final note, she wrote, quote, "If by some miracle my kids live, please look after them and make sure they know I love them." And then a few moments later, Sarah sent a text message to a friend saying, quote, "He's trying to kill us and Tristan and Blake are already dead." Now, thankfully, the friend, once they received this message, they immediately contacted the police. And at 7:45 that morning, just 45 minutes after Brandon first got that message from Sarah telling him that the poisoning, the overdose, didn't work, this is when police swarm the house. And at this point, it is chaos in the neighborhood because 15 police cars have showed up at the house. There were 4 ambulances and a nearby primary school had been shut down to use as a command base. There were helicopters in the air and people truly thought that there was a mass shooting or something going on. But police storm into the house and they find Brandon just sat casually on the sofa drinking an energy drink, and they found Sarah and the 4 remaining children barricaded into a bedroom. The police ask Sarah where the 2 oldest children are, and Sarah lied. She said that her 2 oldest sons were at a neighbour's house. Why are you lying? Her 2 children are literally lying dead in the next room. Does she truly think that the police are not going to find them? Like, why is she lying? Clearly she thinks it's some sort of cover story and she's going to look innocent. However, when Sarah said this lie to the police, one of the other children in the room looked at the police officer and made a motion with their hand, with their finger across their neck, insinuating that their older brothers were dead. And Sarah saw the child make this swiping motion across their neck to the police. And Sarah panicked and she immediately whacked the child's arm away and said, "Don't do that, don't do that." But the police were already rushing into Blake and Tristan's bedroom. And the police found the 2 boys. They still had the bin bags over their heads. And when the police removed the bags, they found that the 2 boys were still alive. Immediately, both Blake and Tristan were rushed to the hospital. However, it was too late. Shortly after arriving to the hospital, both boys passed away 12 minutes apart. And it just makes me sick to my stomach. It was so senseless, so cold. How could they do this to cover their incestuous relationship? And following the murders of Blake and Tristan, Sarah and Brandon were immediately arrested and the 4 younger children were taken straight to hospital. Now, thankfully, the 2 younger children, the 3-year-old and the 7-month-old, were physically okay and unharmed. However, the 12-year-old and the 11-year-old, they were in a pretty bad way. First of all, both of them were still experiencing the side effects of the overdose. They were vomiting, they were having hallucinations, but then the 12-year-old as well had nearly just been drowned. However, thankfully, they did make a full recovery. So when the police get Sarah down to the police station for questioning, Sarah hands the police a page from her notebook with the title at the top of the page saying funeral arrangements. And I'm just like, what? It's like you've just murdered your 2 children and now you have the audacity to try and plan their funeral. So when the police interview Sarah, she tries to blame everything on her brother/lover, Brandon. And this is when Sarah, for the first time, admits to somebody else that Brandon, her brother, is the father of all 6 of her children. Now, I can guarantee you the police were not expecting that. She started to say that social services were about to discover the fact that they were brother and sister and that they had had 6 children. So Brandon coerced Sarah into helping him kill all of the children to keep their secret from the world. She told the officers about the overdose with the ADHD medication. She said about the murders of Blake and Tristan, about the attempted murder on the 3rd child, that they were planning to kill the rest of the children as well. And after Sarah had killed her children, she was also planning on taking her own life. Sarah kept saying over and over again that she would rather see her kids dead than in the care of social services. So because she kept saying this, police were like, Well, there's your motive. And then in the other room, Brandon is being interviewed, and Brandon was the one that told the actual truth of what happened. He made a full confession that himself and Sarah both planned and carried out the murders together. Now, Brandon has said that his reason for murdering the children was that he was so angry about the sexual misconduct allegations. He wanted to, quote, rip their heads off. And he also wanted to, quote, grab them and strangle the life out of them, which is exactly what he did. So who knows what the actual motive was? Was it to keep their incestuous relationship a secret? Was it to stop the children from being taken into care? Or was it because they were so angry about the sexual assault allegations? And the police found a ton of digital evidence against Sarah and Brandon that showed that they were both in this together. It was 50-50. Sarah was not coerced, and they were both charged with murder and held in prison. Now, whilst they were being held in custody awaiting trial, on the 8th of August 2019, over 2 months after the tragic deaths of Blake and Tristan, it was their funeral. And on this day, family, extended family, friends, and the community came together to say their goodbyes. Now, something that both Blake and Tristan loved was motorbikes and fast cars. And after hearing about their love for fast cars and motorbikes, a procession of over 300 motorbikes and 2 Lamborghinis led their coffins to their final resting place. And in the end, Sarah and Brandon, they both gave a full confession in the end, and as well as all of the evidence that the police had gathered, the brother and sister lover duo decided that it was in their best interests to take a plea deal. So in September of 2019, both of them pleaded guilty to their charges, which were 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 6 counts of conspiracy to murder all 6 of their children. And in November 2019, both Sarah and Brandon were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 35 years. And in the aftermath of this case, the 4 remaining children are so traumatized. The 2 older children, they are aged 11 and 12. They witnessed a lot of the murder, of what happened on that day. They can remember what happened on that day. And they're trying to process all of that. The fact that their 2 older brothers were murdered by their mom. But now they have also learned that their uncle that they have known their whole lives is actually their biological dad. And heartbreakingly, both of them, the 11 and 12-year-old, have said that they are terrified and worried that they are going to turn out like their mom and uncle, that they are going to turn into killers and monsters. And both of them have also said that they want their mom and uncle, because obviously they are still calling Brandon their uncle, because he is their uncle. It's just so messed up. They have both said that they want their mom and uncle to stay in prison for the next 300 years. And I just hope that all 4 of those children are safe and happy and can recover from the most messed up upbringing you could think of. And I just want to end this video remembering the victims of today's case, Blake and Tristan. Blake Barris was described as a kind and caring boy. He loved football and sports cars, wore his heart on his sleeve, always made people feel loved, and had a natural ability to make anyone smile even on a bad day. He cared about everyone and had such a big heart. He was taken far, far too soon. He was only 14 years old. Tristan Barris was described as a sweet and loving boy. He was mischievous and brave. He knew exactly who he wanted to be. He loved expressing himself through clothes and bright hair colours. But most of all, he was described as an amazing boy who could put a smile on anyone's face. He was taken far, far too soon. He was only 13 years old. And that brings us to the end of today's incredibly heavy, heartbreaking case. As always, let me know your thoughts, theories, and opinions. And don't forget to leave me your case suggestions in the comments down below, because I always want to know what you want to hear next. Thank you again to Audible for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you all in my next one. Bye.